Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero Community Meeting / Open Discussion. Today is November 16th, 2021, and we have a limited team here with us today. So let's get started. First up, we got some status updates. Dave.
Yeah, so still trying to push through the item snapshot or PR. I think we've got all the comments are addressed. Daniel signed off, and Bridget will probably sign off today. I don't think there's anything open there. We still have room for making changes, so we'll see how the rest of that stuff merges together. I've been rolling some stuff back in the Astrolabe code base off of my branch and looking at putting that behind the item snapshotter as a POC. We're doing some work with the Postgres snapshotter, which is pretty basic, and then looking at rolling in PVCs and stuff like that. And I'll answer for Bridget because she's off working on that kind of stuff today. And so she was on support last week. I think who's on support this week? I can't remember now. I think Daniel's on support. Anyway, we did the handoff on that, and she's working on putting together the CRD APIs for Astrolabe, which will look a lot like the volume snapshot APIs. And she's doing a POC just to get a controller working for that. That's us.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions, comments for Dave? All right, we have one discussion topic added as well. That's you, Dave.
Yeah, so Scott, I just wanted to see if you were hooked up with the OADP stuff. So, we have this proposal for making a DP API that we could call from our Tanzu mission control stuff and Tanzu, and we're thinking this should be something that we have available everywhere. And there's OADP from Red Hat right now, but that looks to be pretty much Velero. So I'm curious if there's any other thoughts on that, or what the interest would be there, or who would be the right people to talk to.
Yeah, and I think Dylan's on the call. He may be better to answer this in terms of the future, but at the moment, basically OADP is a Red Hat supported Velero install. We're basically using the same fork of Velero that we're using for our migration tool. But I think going forward, we may be doing more with that. So I don't know if Dylan has any thoughts here or not.
Yeah, I can add to that. So we're actually totally reworking the API for ODP right now to segment it slightly from Velero to support the future use cases that we envision with it. And funny enough, we actually renamed it to data protection application. So we're probably thinking similarly here. One of the big value adds that long-term we view for Velero is something that you find with a lot of other backup applications. And I think Astrolabe's got a similar concept to this, which is people call it different things, but generally it's called a data mover. So the ability to take snapshots and either convert them to different storage types or providers, or also just simply pick them up and move them elsewhere. So that's really the next big feature development effort on OADP. But as Scott mentioned, yeah, right now it's a way to install Velero with our plugin to support OpenShift use cases. There's also a couple extra components to support. OpenShift's got internal images for an internal registry where we host container images. So backing up and restoring that is it's a part of a Velero plugin. It also uses a separate registry dependency. So for the most part, it's a glorified Velero with OpenShift internals that are needed to support backup restore there. And yeah, it is funny you mentioned that, because we used to call it horribly named. The CRD was just the kind Velero to imply that you're installing Velero. And we said, this is super confusing, so we're going to rename it. And we decided, let's just call it data protection application. And Velero is a data protection application. So that's the thought there. And then I guess one last thing to add to it is, we're heavily focusing on CSI snapshots, but the fact is, we have a lot of customers that, they're still using NFS, they're still using traditional file store stuff, and they need something that's a little bit more reliable than Rustic. Rustic, especially with NFS and you've got root squash set, like there's problems there. So for our migration application, we had to kind of start from the ground up to say how we're going to handle these volumes in a different manner. And we wrote, well, again, this is kind of getting too deep in the weeds for the migration use case, but a glorified rsync tool that takes PVs, rsyncs the data out into a new PV. So essentially like a persistent volume mover. We're trying to think about for OEDP long-term, like, is Rustic the right tool to use for backing up those types of volumes? Is there something else that we can explore? Maybe some of the tools we built for from the conveyor community to do this too. I don't know. There's a lot we don't really know, but all the work that's going to OEDP right now is we're trying to, up until this point, it's been a community project where we basically took all of our Velero installation logic from our migration tool and just segmented out the Velero installation bit so that people could get Velero and OpenShift easily. Now it's kind of turning into more of like a generic, yes, you've got Velero and that does backup restore volumes and does backup restore of Kubernetes objects. And what if you want to take snapshots and move them elsewhere? What if you want to integrate with different backup vendors? So maybe they can add a plugin to OEDP to leverage some of the use cases of Velero too. That was pretty long-winded, but hopefully that answered some of your questions. Whatever you need to know, happy to help answer.
I think we should team up on some of these things. So our plan right now is we have as Tanzu this goal of having multiple data protection providers so that we can have Velero as the basic one, but then we want to be able to swap in a Veritas, PowerProtect, Kasten, and Kasten is off on their own path of how they do things. And so be able to swap those in, but give a consistent experience to the Kubernetes admin. So they get like a limited, basic backup experience, which is pretty much going to be very similar to the Velero experience. Backup a cluster, schedule backup, restore a cluster, those kind of things. And then we can build things like TMC on top of that, Tanzu command line and customer automation. And we'll have like a reference implementation on top of Velero, but then the goal is to get the other DP vendors to buy into this as well. And I think if we can show them that this API gets them not only Tanzu, but also OpenShift, where the OpenShift customers can take advantage of the same API and get this consistent experience, I think that's pretty strong to those vendors. And we're also building stuff like we have a lot of vendors are built around Velero. So part of Astrolabe is taking those core pieces of Velero, putting them behind the Astrolabe APIs so that they're available to the vendors without them having to install all of Velero underneath. Cool. So that's the direction we're going in.
Yeah, that's I would love to set up a separate call to discuss this because it's similar in line to what we were thinking. I'll be honest, a lot of like the current work for OEDP is like productization stuff. So we haven't really put a ton of feature development into it at all right now. So these are conversations that we definitely want to have. It's been kind of on the backlog to start shifting all the engineering effort towards, some more future use cases.
Yeah, and this is a good time to have the discussion. And we're going to do a lot of the work for Velero. So, if you guys are giving input and you're like, hey, this works for us too, then we can, it's a stronger case to like the Veritas and, Kastens of the world to say, hey, look, you got these two already. And then we can take that back to the Kubernetes community as a whole and say, look, we're doing this, DP vendors are doing this, it works. And then let's go ahead and move this towards actually being a Kubernetes standard overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
While we're talking about this too, I wanted to mention Shubham is on the call. I don't know if you guys have talked to him too much. He's also in the ODP project. He is hopefully going to be attending more of these community calls as well because he's got a little more time than me. So if I'm not around and you see him on the call, he's also a good point in contact for ODP as well.
Welcome.
Sorry. What did you say, Jonas?
I just said welcome, Shubham.
Oh yes, welcome, Shubham. Good to have you with us.
All right, he's being shy.
Yeah, I see his mic is turned on, but we don't hear him. Maybe audio difficulties.
Yeah, it must be. Well,
I see Dave talking, but his mic is.
Because other people won't stop talking, so Shubham can say something.
I see. That's me. He wrote in the chat, hello, everyone. So Dave, I had a question for you. Sorry if this question sounds like, I am new to storage, so I'm not really familiar with all the words you said, like Kasten and stuff. But are you thinking that Astrolabe will eventually replace Restic in Velero? So instead of using Restic, you know, with a daemon set installing all the pods, are you thinking Astrolabe will do the data moving eventually?
Yes, so a couple of different things. So one is Astrolabe is a set of APIs, and we have things that back those APIs. And Astrolabe basically gives you things like snapshot plus let me access the data in volumes and snapshots, and it gives out a variety of transports that you can extract via. So that's the Astrolabe API in general. And then right now we have like a really stupid S3 repo that just puts the whole object into S3 objects. We'd like to have something that's smarter, and we're actually looking at using Copia behind the Astrolabe APIs as the destination for things. And Copia gets us things like dedupe, versioning, and it's a lot smarter way to use the S3 bucket. It's similar to Restic, except that it lets us break things up a little easier, and it has some strong support outside. Kasten is using it very heavily internally for them, and so they put a lot of effort into making sure this thing works at relatively large scales. So that's something we're evaluating right now. We've got a POC working with this that we can demo when we do our Astrolabe demo in a couple of weeks. So the idea is that it's broken into multiple things. So the current Restic pods and Data Mover is something that's on the chart for Velero. So this is currently something that's inside the vSphere plugin, where we move between vSphere snapshots and S3, but we'd like to include other things. Right now it uses it. This is actually based on Astrolabe internally. So Astrolabe is used to take the snapshots, and it's used to wrapper the VMware VADP APIs that let us extract data from the snapshots. And we have what's called a data manager that's part of the plugin, which is a scale out data mover. The goal is to start merging that, bringing that up as a Velero feature, because right now, you know, as Dylan was saying, we don't really have the ability inside of Velero to move data, which is something that's necessary. So the existing Restic daemon set will probably augment that with a generic data movement capability, because we can use the same run context out there and make that into our scale out data mover. And that will handle both block volumes using the Astrolabe APIs and also file systems via the Astrolabe APIs. And we'll be able to hook block volumes and file systems and other things into Copia as our backend, but the repo is swappable, so that somebody like a Power Protect can say, yeah, I'm going to use this Astrolabe front end to snapshot things and extract data from the different things that I've snapshotted, but their back end becomes their own proprietary like data domain, and they can, you know, hook the two together. That's kind of the goal there. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely helpful. Thank you. That gives a better picture of what the goals are and what the capabilities each part is aiming to do. So thank you.
Yeah, and then Kasten is another data protection vendor. They were fairly early on in the Kubernetes space, and they're now part of Veeam, which is a big VMware backup mainly. But yeah, so
an internal competitor.
You know, it depends on which direction you look at. From the Velero point of view, they're a competitor, but they're not open source. From the VMware point of view, the Tanzu point of view, they're another data protection vendor that we really want to be able to support. So there's an important part of both, not just competition, there's code sharing. We're actually doing some work with them to integrate their canister technology, which is a blueprint for snapshotting and backing up applications. We currently have a POC underway to integrate that with Astrolabe, so that we can trigger canister blueprints from Astrolabe. so that you could define an application as a canister blueprint, make that a nationally protected entity, and then go ahead and trigger that. And that's something we announced at KubeCon. And you may recall that Kasten was one of the diamond sponsors at KubeCon, so they decided to throw some money at the Kubernetes space.
Very cool.
Awesome. Any other discussion topics here or comments on the topic at hand? So you're going to set up a separate meeting for more discussion around this, or?
Yeah, I think we'll get it. Well, Eleanor and I will catch up with Dylan, and we'll see how we bring this out. Right now, we're kind of doing requirements internally. I want to get outside requirements and, getting a strawman API together, and we'll start tossing it around. And then we'll bring that back into the community meeting when we have a little something to discuss.
That sounds great. And I've got a couple folks on my end that will probably be interested in that call as well. So yeah, if you just reach out, I'd be happy to chat on this further.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Cool. Thank you. Any other discussion topics for today? All right, let's do some contributor shout outs. So Dave, I'm going to ask you to help me here.
Let's see, let me
First
pull
one
this
is from
up.
Bruce, who is part of the new Velero team here over in China.
Yeah, and so this is 4346, and this lets us, what is this a fix for?
Replacing the hard-coded namespace value.
Looks like something in the group version. So yeah, so it gives us a little more flexibility on group versions, it looks like. So that's good. So thank you, Bruce.
Next one is from Alay Patel.
Yeah, so that's a fix for the paging functionality. So we have the issue, the original Velero code was not using the Kubernetes API pagination code. So if we had a large number of objects, at some point it fails. We had somebody was up to like 4 gigabytes of stuff that came back in one big chunk, and it blows out of gRPC. So pagination has been an important feature. The first round of that looks like it had a bug. So this is a fix for that. So thank you, Ale. And then what's this last one here?
From Tiger.
Yeah, so this is, I believe, a documentation fix. Yeah, so this is just a note that when we use the S3 path style, so typically that's something that we use with like either an on-prem object store like a Minio, or sometimes if people have like proxied S3, they might want to go through the URL style. And when you do that, it's actually required that you set the region, even though it seems like it should automatically figure out the region but you don't need a region because there is no region, but you actually have to set that because of the SDK. So he added that into the docs. So thank you.
Awesome. And that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining. Next week is Thanksgiving week here in the US. So many of the US based employees here at VMware will be offline. But yeah, we'll still have the community meeting next week, which is in the Beijing time zone. So 7 p.m. Eastern, where I am, next week. If you want to join, we'll still have that and have the conversation continuing. So with that, thank you everyone. Have a fantastic rest of the week, and see you all soon.
Thanks, Al. Bye.